The Department of Justice is fighting GOA in court,
inexplicably continuing to defend Biden's zero-tolerance firearm dealer license revocation scheme.
For some reason, DOJ is working overtime to prevent us from making sure that this Biden-era gun policy isn't resurrected by a future anti-gun administration. But not only is DOJ fighting GOA, it's also in open rebellion against the Trump administration on the zero-tolerance issue. Why the heck is DOJ doing this? Well, that's the big question we're asking on today's episode. Hi, I'm Ben Sanderson, and you're watching the Minuteman Moment. But before we get into the video, I wanted to take a second to talk about how great it was to see all of you at Goals. It was awesome to be able to talk to GOA members from around the country, and it was incredibly encouraging to see how passionate and engaged so many of you are about fighting for the Second Amendment. Our 2025 Goals recap video is now live on this channel. So if you couldn't make it, check it out to see what you missed. Okay, now back to the video. So as I previously mentioned, the Department of Justice is continuing to defend Biden's zero-tolerance policy for federal firearm license revocation in court. For those of you who are unfamiliar, early on in his term, President Biden announced what was called an enhanced regulatory enforcement policy for gun dealers. This policy required ATF to automatically initiate license revocation for even the smallest unintentional or technical errors by a dealer. Suddenly, innocent paperwork mistakes were turned into business-ending revocation proceedings. And the result was that hundreds of gun stores were shuttered across the country. Within a couple of years, the annual number of revocations increased sixfold. For those dealers who tried to fight back, because of course, we're talking about the loss of people's livelihoods here, they were forced to spend tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees to fight their revocation both in front of ATF officials and in court, and they were usually unsuccessful. Well, we knew that none of this could stand. So in 2023, Gun Owners America sued Biden's ATF twice over its truly depraved zero-tolerance policy. We filed a suit in North Dakota on behalf of Morehouse Enterprises when ATF tried to revoke its licenses. We later challenged ATF's attempt to revoke the license of Kiloton Tactical, a gun store in Florida. But as is so common with rogue bureaucrats, ATF didn't want the courts to see what it had done. So each time GOA came to the defense of gun dealers and sued ATF, the ATF would simply drop the revocation proceeding and let the dealers keep its license. For now, of course. Then, ATF would tell the court that the case was moot and should be dismissed. In other words, ATF was playing whack-a-mole. That doesn't stop us. We lobbied the government, raised awareness, and continued to litigate our two different lawsuits challenging this terrible policy. In our Morehouse case, Biden's ATF ended up making some truly ridiculous arguments. For example, ATF claimed that its zero-tolerance policy was perfectly consistent with federal law and the Second Amendment. In fact, ATF claimed that its mass revocations do not even implicate the Second Amendment at all. As Biden's ATF saw it, the Second Amendment does not protect the right of a private business to sell firearms. This ridiculous claim that there's no right to sell firearms would mean the government could simply ban all firearms commerce if it wanted to. Poof. No more Second Amendment. Of course, that was the Biden administration's endgame all along. Our lawsuits continued through the end of the Biden administration, and we were prepared to continue this fight in the event of a Harris presidency. But thankfully, President Trump was elected, and he quickly issued the first pro-gun executive order in history, protecting Second Amendment rights. Along with other pro-gun actions, the Trump administration reversed course on zero tolerance. And while revoking this evil Biden-era policy, the White House acknowledged that previous administration used the ATF to attack gun-owning Americans and undermine the Second Amendment by the revocation of federal firearm licenses, which shut down small businesses across the nation. So you'd think that would mean the team of DOJ lawyers would take our side in our legal challenges to zero tolerance. After all, the Trump administration openly acknowledged the evil perpetrated by Biden's ATF and set about to correct it.
Yet for whatever reason, the Department of Justice is inexplicably continuing to defend zero tolerance in GOA's cases.
Department of Justice lawyers recently told us that, and I quote, that the government has no plans to abandon its previous arguments. Hold the phone. They have no plans to stop defending Biden's evil license revocation policy? You heard that right. Rather than settling GOA's cases in a way that ensures the Biden abuses can never happen again, the lawyers over at the DOJ have taken the opposite approach, temporarily rescinding various ATF policies and then claiming our cases are moot. But without an enforceable judgment in court, the next anti-gun administration could easily reinstate the zero-tolerance policy with a stroke of a pen and restart Biden's mass revocations like nothing ever happened. Is that what the Trump DOJ wants? If not, then why are their attorneys fighting us so hard in court? It's worth taking a closer look at what DOJ's lawyers have argued in our zero-tolerance cases. They claim to represent the position of the federal government, but the president, the White House, the Trump-era ATF, and ATF's new acting director, Dan Driscoll, have all come out against zero tolerance. That means the very same defendants in our zero tolerance cases have made public statements in support of our legal positions. And yet, it's business as usual for their Biden-era lawyers. We made sure to point out all these blatant contradictions in our latest brief filed in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit. For example, ATF previously told the 8th Circuit that the zero-tolerance policy can't even be challenged under the Administrative Procedures Act because it apparently produced no legal injury or any legal consequences. On the contrary, the White House recently announced that the Biden's ATFs had been weaponized to end the livelihoods of law-abiding small business owners, which led to a nearly six-fold increase in enforcement actions under zero tolerance. In fact, ATF recently invited former licensees who had been revoked under zero tolerance to reapply for new licenses. Yet in spite of this clear admission of wrongdoing by the ATF, DOJ's lawyers are sticking to their old argument that zero tolerance caused no injury or consequences whatsoever. But it gets worse. DOJ previously told the court that zero tolerance never actually punished unintentional human error. But since then, ATF's new director, Dan Driscoll, who is a defendant in this case, has acknowledged that zero tolerance punished honest and simple mistakes. This is a direct contradiction of DOJ's Biden-era claims, and is something both the president and the White House have reiterated. According to the White House, zero tolerance targeted mom-and-pop shops, small businesses who made innocent paperwork mistakes. So why is the Justice Department's team on this case continuing to pretend that zero tolerance did not punish honest mistakes? And this next one's a doozy. Biden's DOJ told the 8th Circuit that zero tolerance never imposed automatic revocations for regulatory violations, and that ATF inspectors still had discretion to decide compliance inspection outcomes. But recently, ATF admitted on its own website that zero tolerance imposed automatic revocation and applied automatic outcomes, promising to reinstate the discretion to tell the difference between an honest mistake and a real threat to public safety. That means Trump, ATF, and ATF's acting director all publicly agree with GOA's position in this lawsuit. So again, why is the DOJ team of attorneys taking the opposition position in court? And that brings us to the defendant's Second Amendment argument. Biden's DOJ previously told the trial court that zero tolerance doesn't even implicate the Second Amendment. According to them, there is no right to sell a gun. Thankfully, the White House rightfully reversed course, acknowledging that the previous administration used the ATF to eliminate Second Amendment rights. You'd think that'd mean the lawyers from DOJ would now concede GOA's Second Amendment claim, right? Wrong. Once again, DOJ lawyers have told us the government has no plans to abandon its previous arguments. This internal conflict needs to end. DOJ's legal team is now in open rebellion against the president and the White House. The very same things the president say are true, DOJ's team claims are false. The DOJ's attorneys' actions fly in the face of everything that President Trump ran on. This has to stop.
Under a Trump administration, all of those Biden disasters get ripped up and torn out. My first week, but maybe my first day in office. The Biden administration is trying to crush independent firearms dealers by revoking their licenses if they make a single error, even in very unimportant paperwork. You know that. Biden has implemented a vicious zero-tolerance policy. Do you know what that is? It's not good. That revokes the license of independent firearms dealers if they make a single minor error, little tiny error. They're out of business.
That's why we're asking the attorneys at DOJ to account for why they're fighting against us and the president on this critical issue that is so important to the Second Amendment community. Wouldn't it make sense to resolve this case with us in a way that prevents Biden's terrible ATF abuses from being re-implemented in the future? Instead, the attorneys are fighting to guarantee that a future anti-gun administration has the ability to revive them with ease. These actions are indefensible. We hope that we can get an answer soon. In the meantime, you should call the White House, get on social media, and ask why the Department of Justice is in open rebellion against the president's agenda, including breaking the promises that President Trump made to gun owners. Now, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with the latest fights for your rights.